Every light you have ever seen came from inside one galaxy. For most of human history, we believed that single galaxy was the entire universe. We were wrong. Not by a little. We were wrong by 12 zeros. The galaxy you live in is called the Milky Way. It holds every star you have ever looked at, every constellation you have ever traced, every point of light in every night of your life. And beyond its edges, by the most famous count we have, there are 2 trillion others. 2 trillion galaxies. If you spoke one name every second, without stopping to eat or sleep, the roll call would take you 63,000 years. That is the question we are going to live inside tonight. How many galaxies are in the universe? It sounds like a question with a simple answer, the kind a child asks from the back seat on a long drive, the kind you could look up in 10 seconds. It is not. It is one of the deepest questions astronomy has ever tried to close, and the story of how we got our answer, and why that answer is still moving, even now, is one of the quietest, strangest stories in all of science. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Unclench your jaw. It is probably holding something it does not need to hold. Let the bed take your full weight. All of it, as if you were a coat finally hung up after a long day. You do not need to remember a single thing you hear tonight. There is no test at the end. The numbers will do their work on their own, the way rain does not ask you to count the drops in order to put you to sleep. And while you settle, where in the world are you listening from tonight? A bedroom with the window cracked open to the cold? A long drive with the road empty ahead of you? Leave a line in the comments and tell me what time it is where you are. I read them in the morning. The whole sleeping world checking in from its different midnights. If this kind of slow science helps you rest, a like or a subscribe helps other tired minds find this place too. That is all the asking I will do for a long while. Now, let us be careful with this question, because it is trickier than it sounds. What does it even mean to count a galaxy? Do we count what our telescopes can see, or what the universe contains? Because those, you will learn tonight, are not remotely the same number. Do we count the bright spirals in the photographs, or also the dim, scattered systems that barely hold themselves together, the ones a camera can stare at and still miss? Do we count only what is close enough for light to have reached us? And what would that word "only" turn out to mean? Counting sounds like the simplest act in science, a child's first mathematics. It is one of the hardest things astronomy has ever attempted. Every count, it turns out, is really a decision about what deserves a name. So here is the honest shape of the answer, given slowly, given completely, the way it deserves. 2 trillion. That is a 2 followed by 12 zeros. 2,000 billion. 2 million million. It comes from a careful study published in 2016, and it is the number on the thumbnail that brought you here, so you deserve to have it in full, right now, in the first minutes of the night, not dangled in front of you for 3 hours like a carrot on a stick. There it is. It is yours, but hold it gently. Because 2 trillion is an estimate, and it is wobbling. In the years since it was announced, astronomers have kept pressing on it. A small spacecraft at the cold edge of our solar system measured the darkness between the stars from a place with no glare at all, and discovered something almost nobody expected. This question is even harder to close than it looks, and closing it will take more than light. The measurements are still being argued over in the polite, footnoted way that astronomy argues. The ledger is open. The counting is not finished. And that, the wobble, the open ledger, the honest, unfinished edges of the thing, is the real story of tonight. Anyone can read you a big number in a deep voice. What we are going to do instead is watch the number being built, stone by stone, mistake by mistake, from 1 to 2 to thousands to billions to 2 trillion, and then, in a twist, almost nobody outside professional astronomy has ever heard, to the discovery that the counting cannot be finished by light at all. Think of the universe as a census book, a great register of every glowing thing that qualifies for a name. Tonight we turn its pages in order. From the night the book held a single entry, to the morning it held 12 zeros, and on past that, to the quiet argument about whether some of those zeros belong. You are one entry in 2 trillion. And tonight, the book happens to be open to the page with your name on it. Here is the gentle irony to carry with you as your eyes get heavy. The census began on a night when the entire book had one page. One galaxy. One name. Everything else, every spiral, every ring, every glowing wheel in every photograph you have ever admired, was already there, hiding in plain sight, disguised as little smudges of fog that nobody thought to take seriously. To understand how one became 2 trillion, we have to go back before electric light. Back to a world where night was dark, and stand beside a philosopher who looked up at a river of stars and guessed, with no proof at all, that it was not alone. That is where the counting begins. Picture an evening in 1755. No streetlights, because there are no streetlights anywhere on Earth. No headlights, no windows lit blue by screens, no glow on the horizon from any city, because no city on Earth glows yet. When the sun goes down on this evening, the dark that arrives is total, a dark almost no one alive today has ever stood in. And out of that dark, as the eyes adjust, rises a band of pale light, arching from one edge of the sky to the other, grainy and soft, like a river seen from the bottom of a valley. Every human being who ever lived before the modern age knew that river personally. It was as familiar as weather. The Greeks called it a road of milk, and our word galaxy still carries their word for milk inside it. Other peoples called it a path of birds, a stream of souls, the seam of the sky's tent, the backbone of night. Whatever the name, the belief underneath was the same everywhere. That band of light and the scatter of stars around it was everything. The complete universe, visible in one unhurried tilt of the head, from any hillside on Earth, every clear night, free of charge. The official census of the cosmos, on that evening in 1755, had exactly one entry. One galaxy. One name. One page. If you have ever stood somewhere dark, a farm during a power cut, a beach long after the last fire went out, A mountain road when you switched off the engine and the silence came down like snow. Then you have seen that river yourself, and you know the feeling it lays over a person. The sky feels like a ceiling. High, yes. Vast, yes. But closed. Finished? A single grand room with the lights embedded in its roof. That feeling is not foolishness, and it never was. It is precisely what the evidence of your eyes reports. For essentially all of human history, the finest minds alive agreed with your eyes completely. Almost all of them. In 1755, a young German philosopher named Immanuel Kant published a book of cosmology, and buried in its pages was a guess so far ahead of its time that it would wait more than a century and a half for its proof. Kant had read about the small, fog-like patches that stargazers kept finding scattered among the stars, dim ovals of light that were clearly not stars themselves, because no matter how good the telescope, they refused to sharpen into points. Most astronomers filed them as nearby clouds, some kind of luminous mist drifting between the stars of our one great system. Kant suggested something else. He suggested, with no way on earth to test it, that some of those little patches were not mist at all. They were other Milky Ways. Entire rivers of stars, complete and immense, but so unthinkably far away that 100 billion suns shrank to a thumbprint of fog. Island universes, he imagined, separate great systems scattered across a dark ocean, each one perhaps carrying its own unguessable freight. It was a beautiful guess. It was also, for 165 years, only that, a guess. There was no distance measurement behind it, no observation that could tell mist from island. The learned world read it, nodded politely, and filed it away with all the other elegant speculations of philosophy. The census book stayed at one page, and the fog patches stayed fog. But notice what was missing, because it was not curiosity. The patches were catalogued with tremendous care. In the 1770s, a French astronomer named Charles Messier, a comet hunter by passion, tired of being fooled night after night by fuzzy objects that looked like comets and stubbornly were not, began a working list of these nuisances that grew, edition by edition, past 100 entries, numbering each one precisely so that he could ignore it. His list survives to this day, and astronomers still use his numbers. The 31st entry, Messier 31, was a soft, glowing oval in the constellation of Andromeda. He measured its position, wrote it down, and moved on to better things. He was keeping, though he could not have known it, a register of the uncounted, a waiting list for the greatest promotion in the history of astronomy. What was missing was not attention. It was a ruler. Nobody, not Kant, not Messier, not anyone for 15 more decades, could measure how far away the patches were. And distance was the entire question. A wisp of glowing gas 1,000 light years away, floating inside our own system, and an island universe of 100 billion suns lying millions of light years beyond it. Look, through an eyepiece, exactly alike, a small, soft, gray smudge. Without a distance, the argument could never end. With a distance, it would end in a single night. Here is your anchor for this chapter, something warm to hold while your eyes close. When the universe had one name, that name was still your home. For thousands of generations, everyone in the long chain that led to you lying here fell asleep under a one-page census and slept well. The book was wrong, and the sleep was real anyway. Remember that tonight, as the numbers grow, they grow around you, never away from you. A bigger register has never once made any entry in it smaller. The count stands at 1. It will stand at 1 for 165 years more. But the ending has already started. Because before the ruler arrives, astronomy will gather in a single room in Washington and argue about this, publicly, formally, 2 famous men on one stage in the most celebrated scientific argument of its century, an argument, at bottom, about how thick the census book is allowed to be. That evening has an exact date. Let us go and sit in the audience. The 26th of April, 1920. Washington, D.C. The Smithsonian's Grand Museum of Natural History. In the evening, the windows dark, the hall filling with astronomers, dignitaries, and the merely curious. 2 men are preparing to debate, in front of all of them, the largest question that has ever fit inside a single evening. Is our galaxy the entire universe, or one of many? History remembers it as the Great Debate. On one side stood Harlow Shapley, young, brilliant, and riding high, because he had just done something historic. Working with the great telescopes in California, Shapley had mapped the Milky Way more ambitiously than anyone before him, and his map had exploded its size. Our galaxy, he had shown, was not a cozy neighborhood of stars. It was a disk so vast that light itself, the fastest thing there is, needs many tens of thousands of years to cross from one rim to the other. He had also found, humblingly, that our sun was nowhere near its center. We were out in the quiet provinces, far from the crowded heart. And that very vastness, strangely, convinced Shapley that the book had one page. A universe already that enormous, he argued, had no need of islands beyond it. The spiral smudges were minor local swirls, weather inside the one great system. Why multiply worlds when the one world had just been shown to be practically boundless? On the other side stood Heber Curtis, older, meticulous, a specialist in precisely those spiral smudges, arguing the opposite with equal conviction. Look closely at the spirals, he said. New stars flare inside them from time to time, and those flares look thousands of times fainter than the same kind of flare elsewhere. Faintness is a whisper about distance. A candle looks dim only when the corridor is long. Line up the whispers, Curtis argued, and the spirals cannot be nearby weather. They are other systems entirely. Other pages. A census book of unknown, perhaps unknowable, thickness. The audience listened to both men make their careful cases, and the evening ended the way honest evenings sometimes do, without a winner. Each man scored points history would keep. Each man made errors history would forgive. Shapley was right about the tremendous size of our galaxy, and wrong about its loneliness. Curtis was right about the islands, and wrong about some of his measurements along the way. There was applause, there were handshakes, and then everyone filed out and went home under the same undecided sky. You have been in this argument yourself. Perhaps not about galaxies, but you have certainly stood in a kitchen while two people you respect argued about the size of something nobody present could measure. How long the drive will take. What the renovation will cost. How deep the water is past the sandbar. Voices rise, cases are built, analogies are deployed, and nothing whatsoever is settled because nobody in the room owns a tape measure. The great debate was exactly that kitchen, scaled up to the entire cosmos, with the newspapers watching. It was not a failure of intelligence. Some of the finest scientific minds of the century were on that stage. It was a shortage of rulers, nothing more. And that is worth resting on for a moment, because it is a gentle truth about knowledge itself, one this whole night keeps returning to. The greatest argument in the history of astronomy, one page or many, one galaxy or a wilderness of them, could not be won by eloquence, could not be won by seniority, could not be won by the smartest person in the room on their best evening. It could only be won by a measurement. And on the 26th of April, 1920, the measurement did not exist. Except, and here is the detail that makes this story wonderful, it almost did. The ruler had already been found. It had been found 8 years earlier in a quiet workroom on the other side of the country by an astronomer that almost nobody in that glittering lecture hall thought to mention that night. While the famous men argued about the thickness of the census book, the tool that would settle everything sat in the published literature, patient as a bookmark, waiting for someone to carry it to a big enough telescope and point it at the right smudge of fog. There is a gentle postscript to that evening, worth adding at this hour. The two men did not become enemies. Science rarely works the way its dramas are staged. Shapley lived to see the islands confirmed, to be wrong in public about the biggest question of his life, and to keep working anyway, which is its own kind of courage. Curtis lived to see himself proven right, and never seems to have gloated. The universe, for its part, took no notice of the debate at all. The spirals hung exactly where they had always hung, all through the applause and the arguments and the train rides home, holding their light out patiently, like letters waiting for an address to be invented. Here is your belonging line for this chapter, and it is a soft one. Strip away the telescopes and the titles and the newspaper coverage, and the grandest debate astronomy ever staged was an argument about the size of home. That is all it was. Two men in a hall, disagreeing, courteously, in the end, about how big the place where you live is allowed to be. The answer, when it came, would be bigger than either of them dared. Sleep can come whenever it likes now. The story will hold its place. Next, we meet the woman who made the ruler without ever leaving her desk, and the man who carried it up a mountain and opened the second page of the book. There is a single star in the Andromeda smudge that changed the size of the universe. Not a bright one. Not one you could ever pick out by eye, or even notice on most photographs. A faint, unremarkable point of light that happens to do something almost no star does. It breathes. It brightens and dims and brightens again in a slow, steady, repeating rhythm, and that rhythm, read correctly, turned out to be a message about distance. To read it, Astronomy first needed the ruler, and the ruler begins with Henrietta Swan Leavitt. Leavitt worked at the Harvard College Observatory, one of a team of women employed, at hourly wages, without titles, largely without recognition, to examine photographic plates of the night sky and measure, star by star by star, the brightness of everything on them. It was painstaking, repetitive, undervalued work, and she was extraordinary at it. Among the hundreds of thousands of stars that passed under her eyes, she paid special attention to one particular family, stars that pulse. They are called Cepheids, after their first known member, and they swell and shrink over days or weeks, their light rising and falling like slow breathing. Leavitt studied the Cepheids in a nearby star cloud, all of them, crucially, at about the same distance from Earth, which meant their apparent differences were real differences. And by 1912, she had uncovered the pattern hiding across her plates, the secret that would resize the universe. The slower a Cepheid breathes, the more light it pours out. Not roughly, reliably, lawfully. Time the rhythm of any Cepheid, anywhere, and you know how bright it is. Compare that true brightness with how faint the star merely looks, and the gap between the two numbers tells you, through arithmetic no stranger than a lamp seeming dimmer down a long corridor, how far away it stands, a clock that doubles as a tape measure. That is what Henrietta Leavitt handed to astronomy. During her lifetime, astronomy mostly forgot to say thank you. But the ruler was hers, and everything that follows tonight was measured with it. Now come to a mountain in California, 11 years later. October 1923. On the summit of Mount Wilson stands the largest telescope on Earth, the 100-inch Hooker reflector, a machine of girders and glass the size of a small house, and at its eyepiece end, on this particular cold night, sits Edwin Hubble, photographing the Andromeda smudge, Messier 31. Entry number 31 in the old register of ignorable fog. On the freshly developed plate, Hubble marks a new point of light, a nova, he assumes, a flaring star, useful but routine. He writes a small n beside it. Then, being thorough, he pulls the earlier plates of the same patch of fog and lines them up against the new one. And the truth surfaces, plate by plate, night by night. The star is not flaring once and fading. It is breathing, rising and falling, in the slow, unmistakable rhythm of a Cepheid. On the plate, Hubble crossed out the N and wrote 3 letters and an exclamation mark, var, variable. Behind that scribble, you can still see it today. The plate survives, hides the loudest quiet moment in the history of counting. Because the rhythm of that one faint breathing star, run through Leavitt's ruler, gave a distance. And the distance was staggering, the better part of 1,000,000 light-years, far beyond the farthest edge of even Shapley's magnificently oversized Milky Way. There was no way to hold the smudge inside the one-page universe anymore. The fog was not fog. It was a second river of stars, an island universe, exactly as a philosopher had guessed 168 years earlier, so remote that all its blazing billions folded down to a gray thumbprint above an autumn horizon. The census book, one page for the whole of human memory, turned. The count became 2. Take a slow breath with that, because you live inside its consequence. Somewhere in your sky right now, below your horizon or above it, behind cloud or clear, the Andromeda Galaxy is sitting precisely where it sat that October night. On a dark autumn evening, away from city lights, your own unaided eyes can find it. A soft, elongated glow, one of the most distant things a human eye can reach without an instrument. When you find it, you are looking at the first entry ever added to the book, the proof, hanging quietly over your roof, that home has neighbors. And once the book had turned one page, it could not stop turning. The same ruler pointed at other smudges, pulled them out of the fog, one after another. Hubble and his colleagues worked through the spiral catalog methodically, and the count climbed 2, then a handful, then dozens. Each measurement was slow. Nights of photography, weeks of developing and comparing plates, a single distance squeezed out of months. But everyone that finished said the same thing. Another island. Another page. Kant's guess had stopped being philosophy and become a growing column of figures. Here is the chapter's quiet line to keep. The moment the second page opened was the moment humanity learned that living somewhere means living near somewhere else. You have never, not for one night of your life, slept in a one-galaxy universe. The neighbors were always there, waiting politely behind the fog, for a woman with a ruler and a man with a mountain to introduce them. But dozens is not a census, and the professors could not turn pages fast enough alone. To count in earnest, the book needed a different kind of worker entirely, a man who first came up that same mountain leading mules on the supply trail, and stayed 40 years to count the light himself. His story is next, and it is a good one to drift to. Milton Humason left school at 14 and never went back. As a teenager, he found work as a mule driver on the trail up Mount Wilson, the same mountain, the same years, hauling lumber, tools, and provisions up the switchbacks for the observatory being built at the summit. He fell in love with the place the way some people fall in love with a person, completely and without a plan. He married, took a job as janitor at the observatory to stay near the domes, and began volunteering at the telescopes at night, helping wherever an extra pair of careful hands was welcome. He turned out, to everyone's surprise but the mountains, to be extraordinary at it. Patient beyond reason. Precise beyond training. He could hold a giant instrument locked on one faint smudge for hours, and then again the next night, and the next, letting light pool on a photographic plate over several freezing sessions until enough had gathered to read. The staff noticed what they had in the janitor. The janitor became a night assistant. The night assistant became a staff astronomer, no diploma, no degree, promoted entirely by skill in the dark. And the staff astronomer became one half of the most productive counting partnership of the century, Hubble and Humason, the professor and the mule driver, working down the lists of galaxies, plate by plate by plate. Humason's specialty was the hardest measurement of the era, spreading a galaxy's faint light into a spectrum, a rainbow thin as a razor, and reading from it how fast the galaxy was moving. Light so scarce, that a single spectrum could cost him every dark hour of several nights. He measured hundreds of them, and his measurements fed directly into the discovery that made Hubble immortal. The farther a galaxy, the faster it recedes. The universe, the mule driver's spectra said, is expanding. But that is another night's story. For tonight's ledger, what matters is what all this industry did to the count. Through the 20s, 30s, and 40s, the census climbed from dozens into the hundreds, then the thousands. New wide-field survey instruments began photographing the sky methodically, section by section, like a farmer plowing a field in careful strips. Plates accumulated in fireproof vaults. Teams of measurers, many of them women, following in Leavitt's uncredited footsteps, worked through them with rulers and magnifiers, logging position after position. By the middle of the 20th century, galaxies had stopped being discoveries. They were inventory. The catalogs held tens of thousands of confirmed entries and estimates of what the great telescopes could reach, if pushed to their limits, ran into the millions. One name at a time, the book thickened. And it is worth pausing, in the drowsy middle of the night, when such things land softly, on who thickened it. When you see a modern photograph crowded with galaxies, spare a thought for its ancestors, glass plates that a man without a high school diploma guided through the dark, hour after freezing hour, breath by held breath, while the mules he once drove dozed in their stable down the mountain. Think of a city at dusk, seen from a hill above it. At first, a few windows are lit, and counting them feels possible. You could point at each one and keep a tally on your fingers. Then more windows light, and more, and whole districts switch on together, and somewhere in the middle of your counting, the city outruns you, and your pointing finger quietly gives up. That is precisely what the mid-century sky did to the people counting it. The universe stopped being a room with objects in it, and became a city at nightfall, lighting up faster than anyone could name the windows. And notice, before we climb further, who wrote this stretch of the register? A woman paid by the hour, whose ruler outlived every famous voice in that Washington lecture hall, and a mule driver who never finished school and died with honorary degrees. The census of the universe was not compiled by the people you would have predicted. This register has never once checked credentials at the door. It has room for every kind of counter, which is its own kind of comfort, here at the soft edge of sleep, for anyone who has ever felt unqualified for the size of their own questions. The book does not ask what you finished. It asks what you can see. But eye-by-eye counting has a ceiling, and by the second half of the century, astronomy was pressing its palms flat against it. A human lifetime is too short, and the sky is too large. Count one galaxy a minute, every clear night of a 40-year career, and you die having tallied a rounding error of what the instruments could reach. And the instrument's reach was never the bottom anyway. Every deeper photograph found fainter entries, and every fainter entry hinted at more beneath. The counters needed something better than patience. They needed a way to make the sky count itself. What they got at the very end of the century was a gamble. A telescope floating above the air itself, and a director willing to spend 10 entire days of its priceless fought over time, photographing a patch of sky chosen for containing nothing. His colleagues told him, in plain words, that he was about to waste the greatest instrument ever built. What came back from that empty patch turned the census book into a different kind of book altogether. The count stands at millions. Sleep is allowed now, and so is staying. Either way, the pages keep turning by themselves. 10 days of pointing at nothing is next. In December of 1995, the director of the Hubble Space Telescope decided to spend 10 days photographing nothing. His name was Bob Williams, and the decision was his to make. Each year, the director of the institute that runs Hubble holds a personal reserve of observing time, a pool he may spend at his own scientific judgment, answerable to nobody's committee. Understand what that time was worth. Hubble was the most oversubscribed scientific instrument on Earth. Astronomers wrote long, competitive proposals for a few hours on it, and most were turned away. Every orbit was spoken for many times over. Planets to map, stars to weigh, distant explosions to chase while they faded. Williams chose to spend his reserve on a patch of sky near the handle of the Big Dipper, selected after a careful search for one quality above all: emptiness. No bright stars. No known galaxies of consequence. No gas clouds, no clusters, no targets, nothing that any previous survey had flagged as interesting. The most thoroughly, certifiably boring square of darkness his team could locate in the northern sky. Colleagues told him, some gently and some not, that it was a mistake. 10 days of humanity's sharpest eye, staring into a blank, the phrase, "waste of the telescope," was used. Some worried aloud that a null result would embarrass the observatory in front of the Congress that funded it. Williams listened and weighed it, and made the kind of bet this whole night keeps honoring. He bet that an empty page, read patiently enough, would turn out not to be empty. So for 10 days over Christmas, through 342 separate exposures, orbit after orbit after orbit, Hubble held still and drank light from one dot of darkness. And the dot was a dot. Cover it with a grain of sand held out at arm's length. That is the size of sky we are speaking of. A pinhead's shadow on the ceiling of the world. Then the exposures were stacked into one image, and the empty patch opened like a door. Around 3,000 galaxies came out of it. Not stars. The field had been chosen to have almost none. Galaxies. Spirals tilted at every possible angle. Ovals of ancient gold. Blue sparks of newborn systems caught mid-assembly. Shapes in mid-collision, trailing streamers of torn stars. And behind the bright ones, smaller, fainter ones. And behind those, fainter ones still, crumbs and threads of light descending into the depth of the image, like pebbles seen through deepening water. Some of that light had traveled for most of the age of the universe to end its journey during those 10 quiet days on a detector the size of a paperback book. The picture is called the Hubble Deep Field, and it did to the modern mind what the breathing star did to 1923. Lie still and let it happen to you, slowly, because it is one of the great lying awake thoughts our species owns. Raise your hand, in imagination, toward your ceiling. Pinch a single grain of sand between your fingers and hold it at arm's length against the dark. Now choose the emptiest scrap of sky you have ever personally seen. Genuinely empty, black as unlit water, the kind of blank a child's eye skips over. Behind that blank, behind your 1 grain of sand's worth of it, are 3,000 rivers of stars. 3,000, each one a system of billions of suns, each one, presumably, with its own long story of collisions and calm, sitting behind the most boring speck of black your ceiling has to offer. And they were always there. That is the part to keep. Through every night of human history, through Kant's evening walk, through the great debate, through every childhood you and your ancestors ever slept through, those 3,000 were present, in that exact spot, shining steadily, waiting behind a grain of sand for someone to stare long enough. The ink was always on the page. The book only needed a reader with 10 days of patience, and the blot of darkness bloomed into 3,000 names. Here is the line to carry from this chapter into sleep, and it may be the kindest fact in all of astronomy. In this universe, there is no such thing as an empty corner. The census found its richest page in the one place chosen, by experts, specifically for having nothing in it. Whatever corner of the world you are lying in tonight, however far from the center of anything you feel your own life to be, the lesson of the deep field stands. Corners are where the counting gets rich. Emptiness has never once survived a patient look. Now follow the thought your own mind is already forming, because every astronomer on Earth formed it within minutes of seeing the picture. If 1 grain of sand at arm's length hides 3,000 galaxies, how many grains of sand does the whole sky hold? That is not a poetic question. It is a multiplication. A child could set it up. But multiplying it honestly, without fooling yourself, turns out to be an art full of traps, and the traps are where the story goes next. The multiplication is waiting. So is your sleep. Both will be honored. Here is the arithmetic. Read slowly, the way numbers deserve to be read at night. The deep field covered roughly 1/24 millionth of the sky. Picture that, if you tiled the entire sphere of night around the Earth with dots that size, you would need 24 million of them, 24 million grains of sand at arm's length, to wallpaper the darkness completely. Inside the one dot that Hubble read, about 3,000 galaxies. So, if the universe looks broadly the same in every direction, and every survey ever conducted says that on the largest scales it does, the sky has no favored neighborhoods, no rich side and poor side, then the multiplication waits for you to perform it. 3,000 entries per dot. 24 million dots. Run it, and the census book announces a number that no committee ever voted on, and no single person ever counted, on the order of 100 billion galaxies. From 3,000 photographed to 100 billion inferred. That is the leap, and you should feel a small, healthy resistance to it, a tug that says, wait. That tug is your inner scientist waking up. Because you have met this kind of leap before, in your own life, at your own scale. It is the gardener's problem. Count the worms in one spadeful of soil, multiply by the size of the garden, and announce the worm population of your backyard with a straight face. Any gardener will smile at you, because they know exactly where that goes wrong. You happen to dig by the compost heap, where the soil is rich, or you happen to dig by the gravel path, where it is poor, and either way, your one proud spadeful quietly lied to you about all the others. Astronomers knew the trap as well as any gardener, so they did the only honest thing. They dug again. Different patch, different depth, different direction. In 2004, Hubble stared even longer at another blank of sky, the ultra-deep field, in the southern constellation of the Furnace. Nearly 1 million seconds of accumulated exposure gathered across months. The new dot came back, holding roughly 10,000 galaxies, fainter, farther, older than before, light hauled up from deeper down the well of time. Later still, the telescope pushed further yet, into what became the extreme deep field, ringing the faintest photons from the same dark. Other observatories dug their own spadefuls, north and south, and the results agreed with a consistency that settles arguments. Wherever you cut the universe, however deep you sink the spade, the soil comes up rich, and rich by the same amount. By the early 2000s, the multiplication had stabilized into the figure a whole generation learned in school and heard in every documentary: about 200 billion galaxies. 200 billion became the number in the captions, the number under the crowded photographs, the number recited in planetariums, while children leaned back in the dark. If you learned a galaxy count at any point in the past few decades, if some teacher or narrator ever handed you a figure for the universe, it was almost certainly this one. The census book, one page in 1920, now held 200 billion, and the counting felt, for a comfortable while, close to finished. Rest in that comfortable while, for a moment. 200 billion is a good number, honestly made. The people who built it dug carefully and multiplied humbly. Nothing about it was foolish. But the gardener's doubt has a second edge, and the second edge cuts the other way. When you count worms in a spadeful, you count the ones you can see. You miss the small ones. Not a few of them, most of them, because in soil, as nearly everywhere in nature, the small outnumber the large, massively and always. And every one of Hubble's deep stares, long as they were, had a floor, a faintness threshold, below which a galaxy, however real, however present, simply failed to register on the detector. Small dim galaxies. Diffuse, scattered galaxies. Galaxies whose light had been stretched thin and reddened by the expansion of space until the instrument looked straight through them. Below the floor, off the page, out of the count. Uncounted, not absent. Everyone in the field knew those missing entries existed. That was never the question. The question was the size of the correction. A tidy rounding error, a few percent tucked into the footnotes, or something bigger, big enough to rewrite the number in every caption on Earth? In 2016, a team decided to answer it properly, and their method had a kind of quiet audacity to it. They did not point a telescope at all. They took every deep survey humanity had already made, all the spadefuls together, and instead of counting the light, they counted what the light implied. reconstructing, era by era across the history of the cosmos. How many galaxies must have existed, seen and unseen, bright and buried, for the visible books to balance? The morning that calculation finished, the census book grew tenfold, and the number on your thumbnail was born. That morning is next. 2 trillion. You have had the number since the first minutes of tonight. It was on the picture that brought you here, and it was delivered whole in Chapter 1, because a promise on a thumbnail is a contract, and this channel pays its contracts up front. What you have not had until now is the receipt. This chapter is the receipt. In 2016, an astronomer named Christopher Consolites, working with colleagues in Nottingham and beyond, published the study behind the number. And the heart of their method, stripped of its machinery, rests on one honest admission that the whole night has been building toward. Telescopes are censuses of light. But the universe is made of matter, and matter keeps books that light forgets. Here is how you audit the forgotten books. For every era of cosmic history, reaching back through most of the universe's age, the deep surveys could tell the team how many galaxies of each weight class were bright enough to appear. Chart those counts, and each era draws a curve. Many small, few large, the same steep shape nature draws everywhere. The team then extended each curve downward along its own measured slope to a chosen floor. Systems holding roughly 1 million suns worth of stars, and counted everything the curve said must lie between that floor and the visible tip. A reconstruction, not a head count, and the authors never pretended otherwise. It is the demographer's oldest and most reliable trick. You do not knock on every door in the country. You count thoroughly in the districts you can reach. Learn the shape of the population, how many small households exist for every large one, and let the shape speak for all the doors you never knocked on. The shape came back steep. Steeper than the comfortable textbook figure had ever assumed. In galaxies, as in soil, as in nearly everything nature builds, the small outnumber the large, and they do so overwhelmingly, and they did so even more overwhelmingly in the young universe, which was a universe of swarming little systems that had not yet merged into today's giants. When the team summed the full population, era over era, the honest total was not 200 billion. It was 2 trillion. 10 times the number in every caption on Earth. A 2 followed by 12 zeros. And with it came the sentence that matters more than the headline. The sentence, "This night has been circling since the first minutes." Roughly 90% of those galaxies were too faint for the surveys the estimate was built on, not hidden behind anything. Not beyond the horizon of the observable. Simply below the floor of our instruments, real, present, shining away in their modest fashion, and unregistered, exactly the way most of the soil's life passes unregistered through a gardener's spade. Give that its full weight, slowly, because it may be the strangest single fact you hear tonight. 9 out of every 10 entries in the census book are names no one has ever read. Not names we lost. Names we never had. The book is mostly ink that no light has yet delivered to any eye, human or mechanical. A library where, for every volume on the lit shelves, 9 more stand in aisles the lamps have never reached. Now let the number touch something human, because zeros this large slide off a tired mind like rain off glass, and they deserve better than sliding. A human heart, across a long and generous life, beats about 3 billion times. 3 billion, your whole life's rhythm, first cradle to last quiet. Suppose every single beat of it counted one galaxy. Every heartbeat of your childhood, every heartbeat of every ordinary afternoon, every heartbeat of tonight, each one ticking off one more river of stars. You would reach the end of a long life, and the census would need almost 700 more complete human lifetimes of heartbeats to finish the register. 700 lifetimes, beating in relay, just to say every name once. That is the thickness the book reached on a single morning in 2016. And yet, here is this chapter's quiet line, and it may be worth more than the number itself. 90% unseen does not mean 90% unreal. The universe, you now know, keeps most of its residents entirely off the visible record, and keeps them anyway. Holds them in gravity's ledger, grows them, merges them, carries them through every era without a single photograph ever being taken. Being registered, it turns out, has never required being noticed. That is true in the census of galaxies. It is worth remembering, some ordinary tired evening, about the smaller registers closer to home. So the story could end here. For almost everyone who ever hears the 2 trillion number, it does end here. A big figure, a gasp, a caption. Curtain. But you are still here, some of you, drifting in and out, which is exactly as it should be, and you have earned the part almost nobody hears. Because while the 2 trillion headline was settling comfortably into the world's articles and captions, a small spacecraft was crossing the outer darkness of our own solar system, 7 billion kilometers from every streetlight, every atmosphere, every source of glare our species has ever made. It was about to do the one thing no telescope near Earth can ever do: measure how dark the universe is. Everyone expected that darkness to pass a simple verdict on the count. What it delivered instead was stranger, and, in the end, better. We will meet that spacecraft very soon. But not immediately, because you have been climbing for a long time now, and even the gentlest climb earns a level stretch. The next chapter is a rest. It asks nothing of you at all. No new numbers. No new names. Only a soft question and permission. Let us stop climbing for a while. No new numbers in this chapter. No new names, no dates, no instruments. Nothing to follow and nothing to keep. Only a question soft enough to hold with your eyes closed. Why does counting put us to sleep? Because it does, and you have known it your whole life, from before you could say why. Counting sheep is the oldest sleep advice in the world. Counting breaths sits at the core of half the meditation traditions on Earth. Lullabies count. Rosaries and prayer beads count. Rain on a roof works the same way. Not one sound, but 1,000 small sounds, arriving in a rhythm that has texture and no plot. And behind all of it, the same quiet trick. A count gives the busy part of the mind one small, harmless thing to hold, and the rest of you is left free to let go. Rain does it with sound. Prayer beads do it with the thumb. Tonight, the sky does it with numbers. A count has no suspense. That is its secret. Nothing in a count can startle you. 6 follows 5. It has never once failed to. The next galaxy follows the last one. There is another, and then another, and another after that, in a rhythm as flat and warm and endless as rain on a roof you trust. And the mind, handed a task with no stakes at all, does what minds have always done when nothing is being asked of them. It drifts. Perhaps you are drifting now. Good. Say it plainly while the house is quiet. Falling asleep in the middle of this video is not missing the point of it. It is the point. This night was built to be slept through. The census book does not close when your eyes do. Every number will hold its place until morning. The counting has waited a century. It will keep until breakfast without complaint. And if you drift here and surface an hour from now, somewhere in a later chapter, in a stretch of sky you do not recognize, that is fine too. The river was designed to be entered anywhere along its length. There is no wrong place to wade back in, and no role is being taken. While you drift, here is the whole story so far, told in 4 slow breaths, with nothing new hidden inside it. Breathe with it if you like. There was one. For the whole of human memory, the sky was a single river of stars over a dark world, and the census of the universe was a book with 1 page. Then there were 2. A faint star in the Andromeda mist turned out to be breathing, and a patient woman's ruler turned its rhythm into a distance, and the fog became a neighbor. Then there were billions. 10 days spent pointing the sharpest eye ever built at an empty grain of sky. 3,000 galaxies climbing out of the dot, and a careful multiplication filling the book to 200 billion. And then, one morning in 2016, the counters weighed what light forgets, and the book grew tenfold. 2 trillion entries. 9 in 10 of them, names that no eye has ever read. That is everything. That is the entire climb, and you are current with the counting again, no matter how much of it you slept through. You could sleep through all the rest and still wake up owning the story. And if you like, while the story idles here, you can do the night's counting in its smallest form, the one that needs no telescope. Somewhere above your roof right now, above the clouds if there are clouds, above the daylight if you are listening from the world's other side, there are stars in your patch of sky, holding their places whether or not anyone checks on them. You do not have to picture all 2 trillion galaxies. Nobody can. Picture 3. 1 directly overhead. 1 out past your window. 1 below your feet, on the far side of the earth, shining over somebody else's bedtime. 3 is enough. 3 is a census a sleeping mind can carry, and the rest of the register will not mind waiting their turn. 1 more thing before the road bends, and it bends beautifully, downward, which almost never happens in stories about the sky. In the register we have been reading all night, you hold a distinction worth falling asleep on. You are the part of the count that knows it is being counted. 2 trillion galaxies, or however many the morning finally settles on, and as far as anyone has ever proven, anywhere, the only place in the entire register where the census reads itself aloud is a warm room with a tired person in it, somewhere on the night side of a small blue world. The sheep do not know they are being counted. You do. That is either a very small fact or a very large one, and at this hour, mercifully, you do not have to decide. Rest there as long as you like. And when you are ready, or when the current carries you, which is just as welcome, the story turns. Out at the cold edge of our solar system, 7 billion kilometers from the nearest lamp, a small spacecraft is about to turn its camera on the darkness between the stars, and what it finds will not move the count up or down. It will show something no measurement had managed in 100 years, that the light and the count are 2 different questions. The story is about to change shape. 7 billion kilometers from where you are lying, there is a camera in the dark. It rode out of our neighborhood aboard the New Horizons spacecraft, the probe that flew past Pluto in 2015 and sent home those images of ice mountains under a hazy blue sky. Then it kept going, as probes do, out into the region where the sun has shrunk to the brightest star in a black sky, and the true darkness between the stars begins. It carries a modest telescope camera built for photographing Pluto. Nobody, at launch, was thinking of it as an instrument for weighing the entire universe. But out there, it slowly became the only instrument that could. Here is the problem it solves, and the problem is light itself, our light. Near Earth, the sky is never dark. Truly, never. Sunlight scatters off the fine dust that drifts through the inner solar system, dust shed by comets, ground off asteroids, and that scattered shine wraps our whole neighborhood in a faint, permanent glow. Your eyes cannot see it. It is far too dim. But it is thousands of times brighter than the signal astronomers would need to isolate to answer the deepest accounting question there is. How much total light does the universe give off? Asking that question from inside Earth's neighborhood is like judging the darkness of a countryside night from the middle of a lit kitchen. The kitchen is not very bright. It is infinitely brighter than the question can afford. New Horizons, though, had left the kitchen. Out past Pluto, the interplanetary dust thins away to almost nothing, and the false glow thins with it. The spacecraft coasts in the darkest environment any human instrument has ever occupied, night, with the lights of home finally off. So, in 2021, a team led by the astronomer Todd Lauer did something simple with it. They had the probe point its camera at carefully chosen patches of nothing, fields far from the plane of the Milky Way, scrubbed of every known star, every catalogued galaxy, every foreground nuisance, and measure the light that remains when everything accountable is subtracted away. Then they subtracted harder, instrument noise, starlight scattered inside the camera itself, the faint breath of our own galaxy's dust. What survives all the subtraction has a name, and the name is lovely, the cosmic optical background. The combined glow of everything that shines every galaxy on every page of the census, seen and unseen, near and impossibly far, all their light pooled into one faint wash across the sky. Surely, you would think, that settles it. Weigh the glow, divide it among the galaxies, close the book. Nearly everyone assumed exactly that. The camera measured. The subtraction was done and redone, and handed to rival groups to redo again. This is not the kind of claim anyone publishes casually. And the first analysis, in 2021, came back strange, in two directions at once. Hold this carefully. The measured glow was about half of what one earlier space telescope estimate had predicted. The night, seen from out there, is darker than we thought. And at the same time, it seemed to hold roughly twice the light that the catalogued galaxies could account for, a faint surplus, arriving from nowhere anyone could name. Too dark for one prediction, too bright for the known register. For a while, the sky seemed to be keeping a secret. And now the turn this whole night has been building toward. When the result was announced, headlines around the world said the galaxy count had come down, that most of the 2 trillion were gone. NASA itself later set the record straight. In plain words, these observations do not constrain the total number of galaxies. They constrain the total amount of light galaxies emit. The till, it turns out, audits GLOW, and GLOW was never going to close a census of names. The famous 2 trillion was built precisely on galaxies too small and dim to matter to the light. You could pour another trillion faint dwarfs into the universe, and this measurement would barely flicker. We went looking for a new way to count the galaxies. What we found was a measurement of their combined light, and those, we learned, are not the same question. You have lived this exact distinction at kitchen scale. Weigh a mailbag, and you learn something true and useful, but not how many letters are inside. Most of them are postcards, a few are heavy parcels, and the parcels own nearly all the weight. The sky's mailbag is the same. A minority of bright galaxies own almost all the light, while the numberless faint ones ride along nearly weightless. The scale is honest. The count stays open. Both of those facts can share the same quiet evening. And then the story did the most scientific thing a story can do. It kept correcting itself. In 2024, the same team came back with a far wider measurement, 16 fields of sky instead of a handful, chosen where our own galaxy's dust scatters the least, and the strangeness quietly deflated. The better number for the sky's total glow came in lower. The share explained by galaxies came in higher, and the leftover surplus shrank until it could no longer be told apart from zero. The simplest reading of the darkest sky we have ever measured, as of tonight, the light adds up. Galaxies, known and faint, can account for what arrives. So the probe could not count the galaxies, and even the weighing of their light took years of refining to settle. Honest measurement, revising itself in public, all the way down. Notice what this chapter has done to the shape of the night, because the shape is the story. Every chapter until now climbed 1, 2, dozens, thousands, billions, 2 trillion, a century of stairs, each landing higher. This is the bend, and it is not a step down. It is the landing where the staircase itself changed, where astronomy learned that the next honest step was not a bigger number, but a sharper question. And here is the difference between this night and every video that recites the big number and rolls the credits. The wobble is not a flaw being confessed. It is the most honest page in the book, the page where you can watch knowledge being made, in real time, by people willing to let a small camera in the dark complicate their favorite number. Because, and this is the line to keep, the one the whole night has been converging on, the number is allowed to move, and even the meaning of the counting is allowed to sharpen. Your place in it is not. Whatever total the register finally settles on, and however the rules of the counting are redrawn, no recount in a century of recounts has ever, at any point, for any reason, removed the page you are on. The totals wobble. The questions sharpen. The entries hold. So the mystery that remains is the one this night was always about. Not the light, for the light, it seems, adds up. The names. How many can hide below the light entirely? The answers, as much of them as anyone yet owns, hide among the faintest residents of the sky, the dwarfs, the ghosts, the whisperers, the ones too dim to answer when their names are called. We go looking for them next, with a lamp turned low. A roll call only works if everyone answers. The universe's roll call has a structural problem. Most of its residents speak too quietly to hear. Start close to home, because, surprisingly, comfortingly, the problem starts close to home. The Milky Way, our own galaxy, the most thoroughly studied object of its kind in existence, the system astronomers have mapped star by star for 4 centuries, is orbited by a family of small companion galaxies, dwarf galaxies, little gravitational villages of a few million to a few billion stars, thin, loose, and dim, circling our great disk the way boats circle a lit harbor. You might reasonably expect that family to have been catalogued generations ago. Our own companions, our own front yard. It has not been. Not even close. New members of the Milky Way's own family are still being discovered in this century, in this decade, some within the last handful of years. And the recent ones are barely there at all. Some are so sparse, so ghostly, that they were not found as glowing patches on any photograph. They were found as statistics, a few dozen stars, scattered across a stretch of sky that turned out, when their motions were checked, to be moving together, holding formation, orbiting as one. A galaxy that announces itself not as a light, but as a coincidence. A village so dim you can only detect that its houses walk in step. Sit with that a moment. It resets the whole question. We are still finding galaxies in our own front yard. If the census misses residents at this distance, neighbors, companions, satellites of our own home, then the undercount farther out is not a suspicion to investigate. It is a mathematical certainty. The only question is its size. And then there are the ghosts. In recent years, astronomers have confirmed the existence of a class of objects that barely qualify as visible at all: ultra-diffuse galaxies. The best known of them carries the almost comical name of Dragonfly 44, named for the instrument that found it, itself built, charmingly, from an array of ordinary telephoto camera lenses ganged together, precisely because ordinary telescope optics scatter too much light to see anything this faint. Dragonfly 44 is, in extent, roughly the size of the Milky Way. Its span rivals our entire home galaxy, a system as wide as everything your ancestors ever called the universe. But it holds perhaps 100th as many stars, spread so thinly across all that width that the whole enormous structure glows like breath on a cold window pane. Through most instruments, for most of the history of astronomy, an object like that is not faint. It is absent. Imagine the census taker standing in a darkened hall, reading names from the register, one by one, into the gloom. After each name, silence. Are the seats empty? Or are they full of people who whisper, people whose answers do not carry to the front of the room? For a century, astronomy had no way to tell the difference, and so the register was compiled, unavoidably, from the residents who shouted. The blazing spirals, the luminous cores, the photogenic minority, the universe as its loudest 10%. Here is the arithmetic that should gently rearrange your picture of the night sky, and it repeats a pattern you have now met 3 times. In every environment we have ever managed to census properly, every cluster, every neighborhood, every survey volume, the dim outnumber the bright, and not narrowly. Overwhelmingly. For every Milky Way, swarms of dwarfs. For every proud spiral in a photograph, a surrounding crowd of systems too faint to make the frame. Nature builds few large things and many small things, few oaks, many grasses, few boulders, many grains, and the sky is no exception to the oldest rule in nature's bookkeeping. The universe's photographs are group portraits of its loudest members, and the quiet majority stands, patient and unphotographed, outside every shot ever taken. Which reframes the great question of the night in the way it deserves. The real uncertainty is not an argument between instruments. It is about how much of the universe lives below the threshold of being noticed. The 2016 study bet, most of it, the whisperers outnumber the shouters 10-1. And the probe still, remember, cannot rule on that bet either way. Whispers this faint, barely touch the sky's light. Which is exactly why this frontier stays open. The census of the dim will be settled by finding them, one strained detection at a time, not by weighing the glow. Somewhere in that frontier, instruments not yet built are already scheduled to try. And here is this chapter's quiet line, the one to fold under your pillow. Faint has never meant absent. Dim has never meant gone. The sky is crowded with residents that no camera has ever managed to notice, and they are no less on the page for it, no less held by gravity, no less real in the ledger of mass and motion. It is worth remembering, in a world that so often confuses being visible with being real, that the universe itself has never once made that mistake. But at least the whisperers glow, however weakly, point a good enough instrument, wait long enough, and breath on the window can be photographed. The next residents on the register are stranger than that. They do not glow weakly. They do not glow at all. And we count them anyway. How do you count someone in a pitch-black room? You cannot see them. The room is dark. You cannot hear them. They make no sound. But suppose the room has a soft floor, old and giving. And suppose you can feel, through your own feet, where the floorboards are pressed down. Someone heavy is standing there, in the corner, silent and lightless. You know it, not approximately, but certainly, not by their light, but by their weight. The universe, it turns out, keeps the majority of its register in exactly that kind of ink. Here is what a century of stubborn measurement has forced astronomy to accept, over the strenuous initial objections of nearly everyone involved. Watch any large galaxy spin. Track the speeds of its outer stars and gas clouds as they wheel around the center, and the numbers come back wrong. The outer stars move too fast. Far too fast for the visible mass, all the stars and gas the photographs contain, to hold them by gravity. By every law of motion we trust, laws tested to exquisite precision everywhere we can test them, those galaxies should be flinging their outer stars into the void like water off a spinning wheel. They are not. Every galaxy holds together, serene, as if wrapped in the gravity of something enormous that no photograph contains. Something unseen holds them. Something that neither emits light nor absorbs it, that no instrument has ever directly imaged, that reveals itself through one channel only, its pull. Astronomy calls it dark matter, which is an admirably honest name, a label for a measured weight with an unknown face. And the measurements agree, from method after independent method, on its share, several times more of it than of everything visible combined. The stars, the gas, the dust, the planets, you, everything light has ever touched, a minority holding. Every galaxy in tonight's story, every entry counted since the book held one page, sits embedded in a vast, invisible halo of the stuff, the way a lit window sits inside a large, dark house. The glowing disk, the part in the photographs, the part with the beautiful arms, the smaller part. What the censuses of light have been counting, all century long, are the windows. The houses were never in the pictures. And here the counting turns almost magical, because astronomers have learned to read the invisible ink directly, and the trick would delight any child. Mass bends light. That is not speculation. It is one of the most precisely confirmed facts in physics, measured routinely for 100 years. So when a great unseen mass sits between us and more distant galaxies, the images of those background galaxies are subtly warped, stretched into faint arcs, sheared, sometimes split into multiples, like print viewed through the base of a wine glass. Gravitational lensing, the unseen weight signing its name across the light of everything behind it. Map those distortions carefully across a wide field, and you can chart matter that no telescope will ever photograph, pressing floors in the dark room, revealed by what they do to every ray that passes over them. Surveys doing precisely this, weighing the sky by its distortions instead of its lights, have charted immense invisible structures across the deep field of view, filaments, knots, walls of unseen mass. And among the findings are halos with almost no glowing galaxy inside them at all. Houses with the windows unlit. Enormous entries in gravity's ledger, written entirely in ink that no light can develop. One care, so the census stays honest. Those dark houses are not counted as galaxies. No stars, no light, no name. They matter to tonight's question for a different reason. They are the places where galaxies grow and where some, apparently, never quite manage to, which is part of why the census of light and the ledger of weight keep disagreeing about how full the universe really is. So pause, in the warm dark, and notice what the word count even means by now, because tonight has quietly stretched it 3 separate times while you drifted. At sunset, counting meant what we can see, bright galaxies on photographs. By midnight, it meant what we can infer, the 90% shining below our instrument's floor. And now, in the small hours, it means what we can weigh without seeing at all, the dark majority, charted purely by its pull. The register of the universe is written mostly in invisible ink, and the visible entries, all 2 trillion or however many of them, every galaxy every telescope has ever photographed, are the annotations in the margin of a much larger book. Let the room take one slow breath with that. And keep this as the chapter's line, because it has been waiting all night to be said. Most of the universe's book was written in ink no eye can develop, written before there was anyone to read it, and kept, faithfully, page after page, ever since. Nothing about being unread has ever made the writing less real, less held, less part of the whole. The register does not need witnesses to be true. Neither, for whatever it is worth at this hour, do you. Nothing about you has ever waited for an audience in order to be real. Still, margins can surprise you. In the summer of 2022, a new reader arrived at the book, a telescope with a mirror of gold, parked in the deep cold, 1.5 million kilometers from Earth, carrying many missions, and among them, one made for tonight. Naturally, it turned first to the oldest pages in the register, the first ones ever written. They were supposed to be nearly blank. They were not. Picture a mirror made of 18 golden hexagons, unfolding in the dark like a flower that blooms exactly once, and can never be repaired if it fails. That is the James Webb Space Telescope. It launched on Christmas morning of 2021, rode a month of nerve-shredding deployments, hundreds of single points of failure, any one of which would have ended the mission, to a lonely gravitational parking spot 1.5 million kilometers from Earth, 4 times farther than the Moon, and unfolded perfectly. In the silent depths of the Pacific, ancient submarine canyons reached the public, and for a few days, the crowded depth of the universe was front-page news on a planet that does not often look up. Webb sees in infrared the stretched, reddened, heat-shifted light of extreme distance, which makes it, in the language of tonight, a reader of the register's oldest entries. The arithmetic of that is worth one slow breath. Because light takes time to travel, looking farther away is looking further back. Point a sufficiently patient golden mirror at a sufficiently dark patch, and the light arriving tonight left its sources over 13 billion years ago. You are watching the era when the very first galaxies were assembling themselves out of the young universe's gas, the first entries being inked while the book itself was still warm. Cosmology had clear expectations for those first pages. The universe needs time to build things. That is not an assumption but arithmetic, resting on gravity itself. Gas cools and gathers slowly. The first stars ignite in modest knots. Small systems merge, over long ages, into larger ones. The models therefore predicted the earliest chapters of the register would read like any frontier town's earliest records: sparse, small, and dim. A scattering of humble first entries, and then, across billions of patient years, the gathering crowd we know. Webb opened the book to those first pages and found the town already busy. Galaxies earlier than expected. Galaxies brighter than expected, noticeably, insistently brighter, and more numerous at those depths than the straightforward reading of the models had scheduled. Candidate systems so close to the beginning of everything that their apparent maturity startled the very people whose profession is to expect things. Within months, the field had a genial crisis on its hands. Theorists checking the models, observers checking the distances, everyone checking everyone, because the first pages were not nearly blank. Someone had been writing in the book earlier, and faster, than the physics textbooks had scheduled. The town was raising rooftops before dawn, in districts the register had listed as open fields. Now, the honest caveats, spoken plainly and without hurry, because this night respects your intelligence even while it soothes you. Distances at that depth begin as estimates, and are confirmed only one careful spectrum at a time. Several early record breakers have already been revised on closer reading, as early records usually are. And brighter than expected need not mean more than expected. The young universe's galaxies may have burned more fiercely per unit of matter than cautious models assumed, young stars being reckless in ways old ones are not. The astronomers on these very teams say all of this themselves, in every paper, in the careful subjunctive of people who have been surprised before. Surprise, in science, is a doorway, never a verdict. But notice the direction of the surprise, because it is the same direction as every surprise in tonight's whole story. And by now, you can recite the pattern in your sleep, which is fitting. Kant's fog patches, more than fog. The great debates, one-page universe, more than one page. The deep field's empty dot, 3,000 entries. The 2016 recount, 10 times the textbook. And now, the dawn pages, crowded ahead of schedule. Every single time humanity has opened this register to a page it assumed was thin, the page has come back fuller than the assumption. 3 centuries of astronomy, and the universe has answered our undercounts every time, with one precious footnote you already know: the till out past Pluto, which turned out to be answering a different question, the light, and left the counting of names to the counters. So hold both of tonight's live wires, gently, one in each sleeping hand. A probe in the outer darkness, teaching us that glow and number are different ledgers, then refining its own weighing year after year until the light added up. A golden mirror at the dawn, whispering that the beginning was busier than anyone scheduled. Both measurements careful. Both, in their different ways, provisional. The book gaining pages at one end while its rules are rewritten at the other, not a contradiction, but a living document, breathing under the reader's hands, the way every honest ledger breathes while the accountants are still working. Here is the chapter's line to keep, and it is an old comfort in new numbers. The universe started writing names early, before there was warmth to speak of, before there was quiet, almost before there was time for anything at all. The register was already filling with entries. Nothing that made it into this book, in all the long eras since, is a latecomer to it. There was never, not for one moment since the first page, a version of this universe that was not already busy becoming crowded. Still, every book, however thick, however early it began, however golden its newest reader, every book has a last page a reader can physically reach. Even Webb's mirror runs out of universe eventually. Not because the universe ends there. Nothing so dramatic. Because the reachable part of it does, and the difference between those two sentences is the strangest boundary in all of science. The edge of the countable is next. Every number tonight has come with a quiet asterisk attached, and the time has come, in the smallest hours, to read the asterisk aloud. 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. The textbook 200 billion, observable. The dark sky till, the crowded dawn pages, the whispering dwarfs, every census since the book held one page, all of them, every single figure, measurements of the observable universe. The asterisk is that one word, observable, and it marks the strangest, gentlest boundary in all of science. Here is the boundary, laid out plainly, piece by piece, at bedtime pace. The universe has an age, about 13.8 billion years, measured several independent ways that agree with each other to a politeness that still astonishes the people who did the measuring. Light has a speed, enormous, 7 times around the Earth in a second, but finite, and nothing that carries information travels faster. Put those two plain facts side by side, and a limit falls out with no further assumptions. We can only ever receive light that has had time to reach us. There has only been so much time. Therefore, there is only so much universe whose light has arrived. And because space itself has been stretching during all those billions of years of travel, carrying the distant sources farther while their old light was still en route, the region whose light has managed to reach us extends, at present, about 46 billion light-years in every direction. A sphere, roughly 93 billion light-years across, centered, hold this thought. We will return to it, exactly on the one doing the observing. That sphere is the observable universe. Every page of tonight's register lives inside it. Every galaxy ever photographed, every count ever argued over, the whole book, inside. Now, the part that takes a slow minute to absorb and rewards it. At the edge of that sphere, nothing happens. The edge is not a wall, not a membrane, not a fade to black, not a border where the galaxies thin out politely toward blankness. A traveler crossing it, if crossing meant anything, which to the universe it does not, would notice nothing whatsoever. More galaxies ahead, more behind. The same rivers of stars in every direction, unremarkably continuous. The only thing that ends at the edge is our reach. It is the shoreline of the lamplight, not of the library. The register ends where the lamp's reach ends, and the shelves, by everything we understand, continue on into the dark, fully written, entirely unread. So, the question you are already half dreaming, how much more is out there, beyond the last countable page? Here is the honest answer, and this night of all nights owes you honesty. Nobody knows. Not approximately. Measurements of the universe's overall geometry keep returning flat as far as precision can push, and a flat universe is consistent with continuing far, far beyond our sphere, possibly without any limit at all. Possibly infinitely. What lies past the reachable is, by definition, the one section of the book about which this night will make no claims whatsoever. No number will be invented for you here, at 2 in the morning, when invented numbers are easiest to sell. A truthful register keeps blank margins, and refuses, on principle, to fill them with guesses dressed up as answers. And that refusal is not a weakness of science. It is the signature of it, the watermark, that tells you the rest of the page is genuine. Tonight's story has been full of numbers that moved, 1 to 2, 2 to billions, billions to trillions, trillions bending back toward billions. It would be easy, hearing all that motion, to conclude that nobody knows anything. Hear it the other way, the true way. Every honest revision was the sound of a mind refusing to pretend. The uncertainty is not the crack running through the story. It is the proof that the story was measured rather than made up. Made-up stories never wobble. Only the real ones breathe. One more thing about that sphere, the register's strangest property, saved deliberately for the drowsiest hour, and it is this chapter's line. The observable universe is defined around its observer. Its center is not the Milky Way, not some monument or milestone in deep space. Its center is, precisely, the point where the looking happens, which means that tonight, for you, the 93 billion light-year sphere of everything countable is drawn, exactly and by definition, around the room you are lying in, around the pillow. If you traveled to the far side of the world tomorrow, the entire sphere would recenter on you, silently, without transition. Every reader gets a private edition of the library. Every edition is complete, and none of them is wrong. You are not somewhere inside the countable universe, the way a coin is somewhere inside a pocket. The countable universe is arranged, precisely, symmetrically, and without exception, around you. It has been all your life. It recenters every time you turn over in bed. And yet, Even inside that generous sphere, even among the pages we can reach and read, the register is not sitting still. While we count it, the book is editing itself from within. Pages are merging with other pages. The count, left entirely to its own devices, is going down. That story, the gentlest demolition in nature, is next. Here is a fact for the far side of midnight. When strange facts land softly, the number of galaxies is falling. Not because anything dies, exactly. Nothing in this chapter dies. Because galaxies merge. Gravity is infinitely patient, and wherever two rivers of stars drift near each other across enough time, and the universe has nothing but time, they begin a long spiral inward. Closer with every orbit, slower than any clock worth owning, until, after ages, two entries in the register quietly close and a single new entry opens where they used to be. The book edits itself. Its method is embrace. This is not rare bookkeeping in some odd corner of the sky. It is the main story of how galaxies grow, the principal biography of every large system in the universe. Today's giants were assembled from smaller systems, merger upon merger upon merger, across the entire depth of cosmic time. The crowded dawn pages Webb photographed are the before picture of exactly this process. And astronomy can read the receipts directly, because mergers leave paperwork. Our own Milky Way's halo is streaked with long, thin ribbons of stars, star streams, they are called. Each ribbon, the stretched-out remains of some small galaxy, are home pulled in, unwound, and absorbed, long before anyone was here to watch. The register in our own neighborhood is annotated, visibly, with the names it has retired. We live inside a galaxy that is partly made of its former neighbors, and carries them still, every star of them, in its own broad arms. Which brings us, inevitably, to the most famous appointment in the sky. Andromeda, the smudge that opened the second page a century ago, the neighbor your own eyes can find on a dark autumn night, is not receding from us. That makes it a great exception. Nearly everything in the deep sky is being carried away by expansion, but Andromeda and the Milky Way are bound by their mutual gravity, and it is approaching at roughly 100 kilometers every second. For decades, the standard forecast has been that in some 4 or 5 billion years, the two will meet, and after a long gravitational waltz of passes and returns, settle into a single vast galaxy, the two oldest entries in humanity's register closing into one. Though, in keeping with the honesty this whole night runs on, even the sky's most famous appointment now carries a fresh asterisk. Recent modeling, weighing the sideways drift of Andromeda's approach and the gravitational tugs of the neighbors around both of us, finds the great merger closer to a coin flip than a certainty. The two rivers may meet and merge. They may glide past one another in the dark, like ships, and part. Even this, the textbook collision, the documentary staple, is written in pencil. By now, that should sound less like disappointment and more like the signature of everything true. Here is a fact for the far side of midnight. When strange facts land softly, the number of galaxies is falling. Not because anything dies, exactly. Nothing in this chapter dies. Because galaxies merge. Gravity is infinitely patient, and wherever two rivers of stars drift near each other across enough time, and the universe has nothing but time, they begin a long spiral inward. Closer with every orbit, slower than any clock worth owning, until, after ages, two entries in the register quietly close and a single new entry opens where they used to be. The book edits itself. Its method is embrace. This is not rare bookkeeping in some odd corner of the sky. It is the main story of how galaxies grow, the principal biography of every large system in the universe. Today's giants were assembled from smaller systems, merger upon merger upon merger, across the entire depth of cosmic time. The crowded dawn pages Webb photographed are the before picture of exactly this process. And astronomy can read the receipts directly, because mergers leave paperwork. Our own Milky Way's halo is streaked with long, thin ribbons of stars, star streams, they are called. Each ribbon, the stretched-out remains of some small galaxy, are home pulled in, unwound and absorbed, long before anyone was here to watch. The register in our own neighborhood is annotated, visibly, with the names it has retired. We live inside a galaxy that is partly made of its former neighbors, and carries them still, every star of them, in its own broad arms. Which brings us, inevitably, to the most famous appointment in the sky. Andromeda, the smudge that opened the second page a century ago, the neighbor your own eyes can find on a dark autumn night, is not receding from us. That makes it a great exception. Nearly everything in the deep sky is being carried away by expansion, but Andromeda and the Milky Way are bound by their mutual gravity, and it is approaching at roughly 100 kilometers every second. For decades, the standard forecast has been that in some 4 or 5 billion years, the two will meet, and after a long gravitational waltz of passes and returns, settle into a single vast galaxy, the two oldest entries in humanity's register closing into one. Though, in keeping with the honesty this whole night runs on, even the sky's most famous appointment now carries a fresh asterisk. Recent modeling, weighing the sideways drift of Andromeda's approach and the gravitational tugs of the neighbors around both of us, finds the great merger closer to a coin flip than a certainty. The two rivers may meet and merge. They may glide past one another in the dark, like ships, and part. Even this, the textbook collision, the documentary staple, is written in pencil. By now, that should sound less like disappointment and more like the signature of everything true. If the meeting comes, here is what it mercifully is not. It is not a collision, in any sense your body knows the word. Stars are so small, compared with the gulfs between them, that when two whole galaxies interpenetrate, individual stars essentially never strike one another. The proportions are wrong by more than imagination can hold. It is emptiness passing through emptiness, carrying occasional lanterns. The merger is a mingling, two swarms of fireflies drifting through each other in the dark, looping, returning, and settling over hundreds of millions of years into one swarm. No crash, no sound, space carries none. A billion-year event with the temperament of honey. And you know this event from the inside because you have seen it at human scale. Two households becoming one home. Two sets of routines, two shelves of mismatched cups, two histories folded after the long, slow negotiations into a single household that is neither of the old ones and contains everything both of them held. The registry gets shorter by one line. Nothing that mattered is lost. Everything that mattered is carried across. Galaxy mergers are precisely that, performed by gravity, on a schedule of billions of years. The census thins while the entries deepen. Run the process forward now, far beyond every human clock, just to see where the book is headed, because the direction is serene. Fewer, grander entries. Local groups of galaxies, ours included, slowly consolidating, each into a single great system, while the expansion of space carries the distant pages ever farther from one another, each consolidated household increasingly alone with its own light. The register, left to deep time, edits itself toward simplicity, a shorter list of vaster homes. There are futures, honestly forecast, in which the astronomers of some unimaginably distant age look out and count. 1. Their own. The book returning, after all its crowded chapters, to a single page, with everything the other pages ever held folded safely inside it. So notice what tonight's question has quietly become while you drifted. How many galaxies are in the universe? When? The count depends on the century you ask in, because the instruments keep improving. And it depends on the aeon you ask in, because the universe keeps merging. There was never one eternal number to memorize and hand to your children. The register is a living document at both ends, being read better at one end, rewriting itself at the other, which is, if anything, a reason to hold it more gently, not less. And the chapter's line, for whoever is still surfacing between the waves. Even when two galaxies become one, almost nothing is destroyed. Stars almost never touch. Most are carried into the new entry, and even the ones slung outward into the dark by the long tides are not erased, only readdressed, still shining, still counted. The universe edits its book by joining pages. 2 trillion then, or hundreds of billions. Shrinking on one schedule, still being discovered on another. The zeros have long since grown past feeling again, so, before the night lands for good, let us do the kindest thing you can do with an impossible number. Let us bring it home and measure it against things a hand can hold. A walk among trees is next. Here is a sentence almost nobody believes on first hearing. There are more trees on Earth than galaxies in the observable universe. It is true by the boldest galaxy count we have, and if you count only the galaxies anyone has ever detected, the forests win by a landslide. In 2015, a team led by the ecologist Thomas Crowther set out to do for trees what the deep fields had done for galaxies. The method, wonderfully, was the same one you have been falling asleep to all night. They could not count every tree on Earth. No one could, any more than anyone could photograph every galaxy. So they counted carefully where counting was possible, hundreds of thousands of ground-measured forest plots, on every continent, in every kind of woodland, dense taiga, thin savanna, mangrove and pine and cloud forest, each plot a spadeful, each spadeful honest. Then they learned the shape of the population, matched it to satellite maps of the world's forests, and let the shape fill in every hillside no surveyor had ever walked. The deep field method, performed on a planet instead of a sky. Their global census came back, roughly 3 trillion trees. 3 with 12 zeros, and the study's other famous finding was pure deep field as well. The total was about 8 times higher than the previous best guess. Even on our own planet, even for things you can lean against, the count went the way the count always goes. Upward the moment someone looked properly. Now, set the 2 ledgers side by side and let them balance in the dark. The boldest count of galaxies in the observable universe, 2 trillion. The measured count of trees on one small blue planet, 3 trillion. Against that famous 2 trillion estimate, the forests of one small world still come out ahead, with room to spare. Every galaxy in the observable universe could be assigned its own personal tree, its own individual trunk and shade, and Earth would still have about 1 trillion trees left over, unassigned, rustling. Hold that gently, because of what it does to the zeros. All night, the numbers have been growing past feeling, billions, then trillions, syllables that slide off a tired mind like rain off glass. And now it turns out the incomprehensible number has been standing quietly in the park at the end of your street the whole time. You have brushed the size of the universe with your shoulders, on ordinary walks, on school trips, on the way to somewhere else, and it never once made you feel small. That is the trick worth keeping from this chapter. Enormous numbers only feel enormous until they are given a body. Give them a body, and they become a place you have been. So let us give the rest of tonight's numbers bodies too, one slow breath at a time. The stars. Take a middling figure for the stars in an average galaxy. The giants hold trillions, the dwarf majority far fewer. Multiply through the register, and the total number of stars in the observable universe lands in the neighborhood of a 1 followed by 23 zeros. Now fetch the classic comparison, the one your childhood already knows, the grains of sand on Earth. Every beach, every desert, every dune and sandbar on the planet has been estimated by the same census of samples method, sand being another thing nobody counts twice, at around a 7 followed by 18 zeros. Divide the one ledger by the other, and the old poetry survives modern arithmetic with tens of thousands to spare. For every grain of sand on Earth, tens of thousands of stars. Pinch a single grain between 2 fingers, feel how small a thing you are holding, and know that the sky's ledger answers your pinch with a city of suns. And then turn the telescope around, because the strangest ledger of the night is the nearest one. Your own body is built of roughly a 7 followed by 27 zeros worth of atoms, a number that towers over the star count, the way the star count towers over the galaxies. Read that again, slowly, the right way around. There are unimaginably more atoms in the hand holding your blanket than there are stars in every galaxy of the visible universe combined. Whatever largeness the sky holds, the ordinary matter lying in your bed tonight holds more parts, more multitude, more sheer counted plenty. You are not a small thing in a large universe. You are a large universe's worth of smallness, folded warm under a blanket. And there is the chapter's line, arrived at honestly. The universe's numbers are not other. They are the same sizes life already comes in: trees, sand, atoms, the crowd inside a single sleeping body. 2 trillion is not the size of something alien and cold. It is roughly the size of a planet's forests. The census of everything, it turns out, is written in quantities your own street already knows by heart. But a count of identical marks would be a dull book, and this register is anything but dull. 2 trillion entries, and, as far as anyone has ever checked, no 2 of them alike. Before the night lands, the shapes themselves deserve one slow chapter: the wheels, the ovals, the ghosts, the ring that should not exist. The kinds of home are next. A ring of blue stars, thousands of light years across, circling a golden core, with, apparently, almost nothing joining the two. No arms, no bridge, no disk. A wedding band of newborn suns around a heart of old gold, hanging in the dark as if placed there. That object exists. It is called Hoag's object. An astronomer named Arthur Hoag stumbled onto it in 1950, and it has been quietly embarrassing classification systems ever since. It is the sky's way of announcing the subject of this chapter. The list may be long beyond imagining, but it repeats itself never. So spend a slow minute at each window, the way you would walk a night street where every lit room is furnished differently, hands in pockets, in no hurry at all. The spirals. The celebrities of the night sky, flat disks of stars wound with luminous arms, star-forming regions strung along them like lamps on a wire, each arm a slow-turning wave where gas bunches and new suns kindle. Our Milky Way is one. Andromeda is another. When you close your eyes and picture a galaxy, you are almost certainly picturing a spiral, the face the universe shows on posters. They earn it. Nothing else in nature manages to look simultaneously that vast and that gentle. The ellipticals. Vast, calm ovals of old golden stars, the settled aristocracy of the sky. Little gas remains in them, so few new stars ever ignite. Nothing swirls, nothing kindles. They glow, smooth and even, like lamplight through linen. Many are the products of the great mergers you already know about, households joined so long ago that every trace of the original furniture has blended. The largest galaxies known are ellipticals, retired grandeur, mass without hurry, the register's oldest money. The dwarfs. The overwhelming, whispering majority, as you learned among the too faint to answer. Small, loose gatherings of a few million to a few billion stars, dim enough that our own front yard is still surrendering new ones to careful statistics. If the universe were a census of households, dwarfs would be nearly every line of it. Modest rooms, unphotographed, unfamous, outnumbering every mansion by swarms upon swarms. The universe is not mostly grand. The universe is mostly modest, and holds its modest members with exactly the same gravity. The irregulars, systems with no settled shape at all, often the survivors of near misses and mergers, still catching their breath after gravity rearranged them, trailing streamers, lopsided mid-gesture. The Magellanic Clouds, visible from Earth's southern half with the naked eye, are two of them. Our own sky carries a pair of beautiful unfinished sentences. And the sky, notice, does not tidy them up before recording them. Unfinished is a shape it accepts. It has to be. On the longest view, everything up there is unfinished, and the outliers beyond every category. Ring galaxies like Hogue's, whose origin is still debated, perhaps an ancient collision, perhaps the slow work of the galaxy's own internal dynamics, a mystery worn as jewelry. Ghosts like Dragonfly 44, Milky Way wide and almost too faint to exist. Giants with double cores, two households caught mid-embrace, two hearts not yet one. Every deep survey turns up a few objects that fit nothing, and every one of them gets recorded anyway. The sky has never once met a shape it refused. Now notice what all this variety does to the question you brought to bed. How many galaxies? As if the sky were a bag of identical marbles needing only a tally. But nothing up there is generic. Not one entry. Every galaxy, all 2 trillion or however many, is a specific place. This ring and no other. This ragged survivor with this exact trail of stars. This quiet dwarf with its few million suns arranged in a pattern that will never occur again anywhere. The astonishing thing about the universe was never merely the length of its list. It is that the list, in all its trillions of lines, never once stutters into repetition. You know this truth from the street where you live. From a distance, at night, from a hill, rooftops, a count, a number for the housing office. Walk the same street slowly, and the count dissolves into particulars. The window with the plants crowding the sill, the one flickering blue with a late film, the one dark early, the one where someone is still up at this hour, lamp on, listening to something quiet, perhaps to this. A census, up close, is never a number. It is a neighborhood. It was always a neighborhood, all the way down, and the number was only ever the neighborhood seen from too far away to love. Here is the chapter's line, then, and it has been earning itself all night. In a register of 2 trillion entries with no repeats, unrepeatable is not a distinction. It is the entry requirement, the one thing every page has in common. Every galaxy is one of a kind, which means one of a kind is the most ordinary thing in the universe. Whatever kind you are tonight, however odd your shape has felt lately, the book has never needed you to match another page. Nothing in it matches. That is the filing system. There is one entry left to visit before the closing, the only one in the whole sky whose address can be written out in full, line by line, and checked against the post. Yours. The last address of the night is next. Every child has done it. On the inside cover of a school book, under their own name, the address begins sensibly: street, town, country, and then, because the pen refuses to stop, it keeps going. The planet, the solar system, the galaxy, the universe. It is half a joke when a child writes it, and the child half knows it and writes it anyway, because something in the expanding lines feels true. Here is the strange news from the far end of tonight. Astronomy checked. The joke is a working address. So let us write yours, the real one, the one a century of measurement has confirmed line by line, slowly, the way an envelope would need it. And let each line settle over you like a blanket being drawn one layer higher. Line 1. Your room, in its house, on its street. The envelope's ordinary beginning. The warm center of the whole affair, where the lamp is on, or was. Line 2. The planet Earth. A blue world, mostly ocean, wrapped in a skin of air thinner, proportionally, than the shine on an apple. The only line of this address, so far as anyone has proven, anywhere, ever, where anything sleeps. Line 3. The solar system. One steady middle-sized star, of the sky's quieter sort, and its small traveling family, 8 worlds, their moons, a belt of leftover stones, a halo of distant ice. Your world is the third stone outward, the one at the comfortable distance, the one where water neither boils away nor locks solid. An address already improbable, 2 lines in. Line 4. The Orion Arm. Our sun rides in one of the Milky Way's lesser spiral arms, a short arm, a side street, not one of the grand boulevards, about 2/3 of the way out from the center. The galactic suburbs, dark skies, little traffic, far from the crowded, roaring core. Good for raising planets. Good for sleeping. Line 5. The Milky Way itself. The river of stars your ancestors mistook for the entire universe, the book's founding entry, a spiral among spirals, home to hundreds of billions of suns, of which yours is one, of which you are warmed by exactly one, which is enough. Line 6. The local group. The small neighborhood of galaxies, bound loosely together by mutual gravity, the Milky Way, Andromeda, approaching at its stately 100 kilometers a second, and dozens of dwarf companions in quiet attendance. The village scale of the cosmos, 2 bright households, many modest ones, all sharing a lane. Line 7, and here the address opens all the way out. Laniakea. In 2014, a team led by the astronomer Brent Tully mapped not just where the galaxies around us sit, but where gravity is carrying them, charting the great slow currents of the local universe the way a hydrologist charts a watershed. And the currents revealed a shape, our local group, the Virgo cluster, 100,000 galaxies altogether, all drifting down the same immense gravitational valley. One connected system, one basin of attraction, one address line. They named it with a Hawaiian word, and the translation deserves saying slowly at this hour: Lania Kea. Immeasurable heaven. That is the largest line of your address astronomy has so far drawn a border around. An immeasurable heaven, 100,000 galaxies wide, with your bed in it. And the surveyors themselves hold that border in pencil. The flows are still being mapped, and there may yet turn out to be an eighth line, wider still. Read the whole envelope back now, top to bottom, one breath per line. Room, Earth, Solar System, Orion Arm, Milky Way, Local Group, Lania Kea. 7 lines. A child's joke, upgraded by 100 years of patient measurement into the truest piece of paperwork you own. And here is what the envelope quietly proves, the thing the child's pen suspected all along. A letter with that address could, in principle, find you. Which means the reverse reading is also true, and it is the better one. From anywhere in the immeasurable heaven, from any of those 100,000 galaxies, from any shore of the basin, there exists a sequence of turns, each one written on a real signpost that ends at your door, at this room, at this bed. You are not adrift, approximately located, more or less findable. You are indexed, filed under 7 headings, each one larger and older than the last, each one holding all the ones inside it, the way nested bowls hold each other, without effort, without strain, by being the right sizes for one another. And notice, before the last 2 chapters carry you down, how quiet the address is at every scale. No line of it is going anywhere tonight. The earth will turn you gently through the dark at its usual, imperceptible pace. The sun will hold its family without effort, the way it has for 4.5 billion years. The Orion Arm will complete another sliver of its long, slow lap around the galactic center, a lap so unhurried that your whole life is a rounding error in it. Andromeda will close another few million kilometers of its approach before morning, and be, for all purposes, exactly where it was. Every line of your address is in motion, and every motion is so vast and so smooth that the net effect, here at line 1, in the room, is perfect stillness. You are riding 7 nested carousels at once, and the ride is so well made that it feels like lying still in bed. The chapter's line is the simplest of the whole night, and it may be the one worth falling asleep against. Your address is 7 lines long, and every line of it is home. Not one line is foreign territory. Not one line is somewhere you are merely passing through. You have never once, in your entire life, awake or asleep, lost or found, been outside. One question remains. The one on the thumbnail. The one from the back seat of the car. The one this entire night has been circling like a slow moth. It has earned a straight answer, and so have you. The honest answer is next. How many galaxies are in the universe? Here is the answer, plainly, after everything, in 3 honest layers. Counted one by one, on real images, billions of galaxies, so far. Pointed to by the deep surveys, a population of at least hundreds of billions. And by the famous 2016 reconstruction, extending every measured curve down to systems holding roughly 1 million suns worth of stars, about 2 trillion. Which of those is the answer depends on something no telescope can decide for you, what you agree to call a galaxy, and how faint you are willing to go. Pressed hard enough, the question does not end in a number. It ends in a definition, and science saying so, out loud, in its best journals, is precisely the reason you can trust every number it has told you tonight. That is not the sound of a question failing. Listen again, slowly. It is the sound of the opposite thing. A century ago, the answer was 1, and it was confident, it was consensus, it was taught in schools, and it was wrong. Tonight's openness is honestly earned. The reconstruction is real science, published and argued over. The probe in the outer dark is real science too, and its lesson was never a smaller number, but a sharper question. The light and the count are different ledgers. Between the counted and the reconstructed lies the growing edge, the exact seam where knowledge is being made right now, the place where the next decade's instruments will do their work while you and I are asleep. Now watch the whole night fold together, one landing after another, nothing new, just the story, seen once from above, the way a river is seen from the last bridge before the sea. 1. A river of stars over a dark world, a philosopher's unprovable guess, and a book with a single page. 2. A breathing star in the Andromeda mist, measured against a patient woman's ruler, and the fog became a neighbor. Thousands, then millions. A mule driver and a mountain of cold nights, thickening the register one glass plate at a time. 100 billion. 10 days spent staring at a grain of empty sky, 3,000 galaxies climbing out of the dot, and a gardener's careful multiplication. 2 trillion. The morning the counters weighed what light forgets, and found that 9 of every 10 pages had never been read. And then the bend, the till, in the outer dark, weighing the whole sky's light, and teaching the counters that glow cannot close a census of names, the question itself, changing shape after a century of climbing. Golden hexagons finding the dawn pages crowded. Pages merging into pages under gravity's patient editing. A planet whose trees outnumber the whole visible sky's galaxies. An envelope with 7 lines and your name at the top. That is the entire journey, and you have made it. All of it. Whatever you drifted through, because drifting was always part of the design. You now hold the full shape of one of the great stories of measurement our species owns, from 1 to 12 zeros, and onward into the question itself. And you hold it at the 1 hour of night when the mind holds things most loosely and most kindly, which is, not by accident, the best possible way to hold it. And if, someday, A child in the back seat of your car asks you the question this night began with, how many galaxies are there? You now own the truest possible answer, and it fits in a breath. You can say about 2 trillion by the boldest count, and then, if the road is long and the child is the kind who stays awake, you can add the better half, but we are still counting, and every time we count more carefully, the universe surprises us. That second sentence is the real inheritance of tonight. The estimate will almost certainly have changed by the time that child is your age. The surprise will not have. Of all the things this story hands down, the rulers, the plates, the golden mirrors, the most durable is the simple expectation that the next honest look will probably change the number. Every honest look so far has. That is not the number failing. That is the looking, working. So let the number go now. Open the hand. Watch it leave without regret. It was never the point, and it was never yours to keep steady. Because here, at the peak of the night, with everything counted, is the one thing in the whole story that the recounts have never touched. The fixed point every revision has orbited without ever moving it. The count moved. 1, 2, dozens, billions, 2 trillion, and then the very meaning of the counting moved. A century of motion. Your entry never moved. At every stage of the counting, under every correction, in every edition of the register, from the one-page book your ancestors slept under, to the 200 billion textbook of your own school years, to the 2 trillion headline, to whatever total next decade's mirrors finally print, the page with your name on it appears in every single one. No recount has ever removed it. No recount ever could, because every count, whatever its total, however it wobbled, was always a count of a universe that contains this room. The answer is still open. Your place in the answer never was. That is the summit of the night. And the summit, it turns out, is a good place to lie down. Nothing remains now but the landing. No new numbers, no new names, no new anything. Just the slow, deliberate closing of a very large, very old, very patient book. Let us close it properly. Come back to the very beginning, because the night ends where it began. Every light you have ever seen came from inside one galaxy. That was the first sentence of the night, hours ago now, when you were more awake than you are at this moment. It is still true. Every lamp of your life, every star over every roof you have ever slept under, every constellation you learned as a child and half forgot, every point of light in every remembered night, all of it, the interior of a single galaxy, 1 page's worth of light in a register that runs, by the boldest honest estimate, into the trillions of pages. But the sentence lands differently now, doesn't it? Hours ago, it was a fact about limits. Everything you have ever seen, only 1 page. Now you know what the rest of the book holds, and how it came to be counted, and the same sentence has turned itself inside out. 1 page was enough to fill every night of a human life with wonder. That is how rich the register runs. That is what kind of book you live in. You asked, at bedtime, how many galaxies there are. The universe's truest reply, after 100 years of counting, is, the book is still open, and you are in it either way. Nothing else tonight is new. This is the landing, and a landing's only job is to be soft. So let the pictures pass one last time, in order, like pages turned by someone else's hand. You do not even have to turn them. A dark world under a river of stars. A philosopher's guess, waiting patiently, out of print, for its proof. A hall full of famous argument, ended 8 years later by a quiet woman's ruler. A star that breathes in the Andromeda mist. A mule driver warming his hands on a freezing mountain, guiding starlight onto glass. A grain of empty sky blooming into 3,000 names over Christmas. A morning in 2016, when the book grew tenfold. A small camera alone in the outer dark, weighing the light of everything, and teaching us which questions light cannot answer. Golden hexagons opening on crowded dawn pages. Ribbons of retired names streaming through our own halo. A planet whose trees outnumber the galaxies. A ring of blue stars around a golden core. An envelope with 7 lines, every line home. A question honestly held open and held gently. And in every one of those pictures, without a single exception, the same small constant, easy to miss and impossible to remove. A warm room on a small world where someone is being counted. The book does not need you awake to keep your page. That is the deepest mercy of a register. It holds what it holds while you rest. The stars will not lose their places tonight. The mergers will proceed at their pace of honey, unattended. The dwarfs will go on whispering. The ghosts will go on glowing like breath on glass. The instruments will go on politely arguing about the total, and the total will go on not needing your supervision, tonight or any night. So let the counting stop asking anything of you now. It never really was asking. It was only keeping you company on the way down. If sleep has not quite arrived yet, do not chase it. Chasing is a daytime skill. Instead, try the oldest trick in tonight's story, the one that has worked since before the story had numbers in it. Count something slow. Count your own breaths, not to reach a total, just to keep a gentle register. In 1. Out. In 2. Out. Somewhere in the low numbers, the count will lose its place, the way every count in this story eventually lost its place, and that losing is not failure. That losing is the door. Every census taker in tonight's tale fell short of the full total, and the universe held their entries anyway. It will hold yours. And if you are drifting already, halfway between the page and the dark, hearing these words the way you hear rain from indoors, then everything is going exactly as designed. There is nothing here to finish. There was never anything to finish. A register is not a story with an ending. It is a keeping, and keepings do not end. They just continue quietly in other rooms. Let your breath find the slow rhythm it has been waiting all day to find, the one it uses when nobody is watching. Let the last numbers dissolve on your tongue like the ends of words. They were only ever names for plenty. What remains when they dissolve is the plain fact that was under them all along. You live in a universe so generous with places that it has honestly lost exact count of them, and in all that uncounted plenty, tonight, it holds precisely, particularly, one of you. The sky will keep the ledger open. The pages will all be there in the morning, every one of them, the read and the unread. You have been counted. You can rest now. Sleep well. If this slow kind of science carried you somewhere near sleep, the subscribe button is only a bookmark. It means the next quiet night will know where to find you. And if you are still half here, the comments are a register of their own. Where you listened from, and what hour the night reached you. I read them all. But that is for tomorrow. Nothing more is asked of you tonight. The book is closed. The count is kept. Good night.